Now, staying in Nigeria, the leader of the proscribed Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, has vowed not to beg for his release after being cleared by a federal high court in the nation's capital, Abuja. This was contained in a letter made available by his lead counsel, Mike Ozekhome. Now, Kanu's counsel, Ifeanyi Ejiofor, also issued a statement stressing that Kanu has been effectively and validly discharged by the judgment of the Court of Appeal, which prohibited his further trial and detention. Kanu believes begging for his release would insult the memory of late Pa Mbazulike Amechi, who traveled to Abuja to honor his dying wish, but was allegedly treated with extreme contempt and disrespect for doing so. Joining me live on the news to have a professional touch on this is Kingsley Chime. He's a legal practitioner. Thank you so much for your time, Kingsley.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's get straight to it. What do you make of this particular development concerning Nnamdi Kanu's stance that he wouldn't beg for his release due to a court judgment that cleared him?
Well, I've always maintained that the problem with leader of IPOB can only be resolved. I mean, the challenges around IPOB and the struggles, and then the court actions emanating therefrom can only be resolved through a political solution. It cannot be through a legal solution. Of course, both the lower court and the Court of Appeal has on several occasions discharged Kanu, but federal government, as far as I'm concerned, had filed an appeal and a stay of execution, and I think the matter is currently at the Supreme Court. But while this matter lingered, there have been several interventions from well-meaning Nigerians. I'm aware that some Southeast governors had reached out to the President Tinubu to see how IPOB leader can be released, but it has not yielded any solution. And of course, you also recall that there has been some agitations, in order to drive home the demands of release for the release of IPOB leader from the southeastern part of Nigeria, which culminated into a sit-at-home that is usually observed every Monday. And at some point, it was declared 2-week sit-at-home. That was the height of it. And I think Nnamdi Kanu also reached out to his people. He also wrote a letter, a handwritten letter, telling them to stop the sit-at-home. I think all those were towards ensuring that he gets released from detention. But it appears that President Tinubu, seemed not to be towing that path. And we have to understand that this Nnamdi Kanu's issue has actually become a national issue. How former President Buhari treated this issue shouldn't be repeated by the new administration. I think it is important that President Tinubu sees reason and allow this young man to enjoy his freedom.
All right, so earlier I had a conversation with a legal practitioner who said that jumping bill, which of course happened with Nnamdi Kanu much earlier at the beginning of this particular ordeal, is one of the reasons why he's still in detention. Is that strong enough to keep him still in detention in spite of a court ruling saying, you know what, let this man go?
Well, because the matter is still in court, but I'm aware that Court of Appeal has cleared that issue, that Nnamdi Kanu never jump bail. As a matter of fact, even under our laws, right to self-defense is protected and guaranteed under the Constitution. You cannot, it's only the living that can stand trial. So he has alleged, Nnamdi Kanu has alleged that his life was threatened. That was why he had to jump bail, if there's anything like that at that moment. So you may not begin to see it from that perspective. He has to be alive first and foremost before the trial can continue. So that was what they presented to the lower court and the Court of Appeal, upon which the charges on that respect was discharged. But I don't know why, or other reason why federal government has continued to detain him. But if it is an issue of bail, of course, bail is a discretionary power of the court, and the court in its wisdom, decided to grant him bail at the time And he feels that there was invasion of his home by the military and armed personnel at the time, and he has to escape. Of course, it is all over the media that certain persons were killed in that incident. So are we now saying that he should be there and be killed, because court has given an order that he should not leave a certain location, as part of his bail condition? So I'm not buying that idea. But like I said, this is not an issue that can be resolved through the court process. It is something that will have to resolve through a political solution.
All right, now talking about a political solution, what do you see happening in the coming days, particularly in the southeastern part of Nigeria, where, of course, we understand that since the beginning of this particular, will I call it audio right now, we know that the security situation in these areas, have been quite shaky, right? So what do you see happening, as an eventual outcome and in the coming days?
Well, like I said, at some point, I think last month, they declared 2 weeks at home. Nnamdi Kanu himself and through his counsel, intervened, and that also saw some significant progress. We have to understand that this issue of self-determination, has crippled economic activities in the southeast region of the country. And I don't think they can withstand such continuous sit at home, because people over there are predominantly business women and businessmen. So I think Nigeria may begin to feel the ripple effects. It's like a rat race. What goes around may eventually come around. So it is for the interest of all parties, both the IPOB agitators and the federal government, to reach a consensus on how to resolve this issue. Right to self-determination is protected under the international treaties, both on Universal Declaration of Human Rights, United Nations Charter, and African Charter as well. So these are protected. We have seen other countries, succeed through self-determination.
All right,
but of course.
All right, Kinsley. Sorry, I have to cut in here. We are pressed with time, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.